Hey, closet busters and bold move makers. It is time once again for Life Uncloseted. So I want you to gather around because it is time once again to kick down those closet doors of your life. We're here to escape our BS, explore our fears, and elevate our self-expression. I'm your host, Rick Clemens. I'm the bold move expert and that coming out guy who's going to take you to the party, the pulpit, the wake, and back to the party of living your life uncloseted. So come on along with me and grab hold of yourself and get ready to step out, step up, and step into facing your fears, making your bold moves, and living life without apologies. Now let's get to the show. Hey, Life Uncloseted family. It's time once again to come out of those closets, those places that we tend to make excuses and we don't want to face our fears, and then we find ourselves constantly apologizing for being who we are in the world. Everything from being gay to having an affair to going to leave a job that we really hate, or even turning from being a very faith-based person to an atheist. Yes, that is what we are talking about today. I met today's guest at a conference that we both attended, and we had a nice conversation, and then out of the blue, he reached out to me and said, I think I've got a subject here for your podcast. And as soon as I read it, I thought this will be a great topic, because as somebody in the LGBTQ community, the thing that I have seen most of my clients as I've coached with them, as I've helped them come through the closet doors, this thing about faith and religion and being who they are many times is the biggest stumbling block. And then today in the world that we live, I know that there are fewer butts in the pews as people are abandoning religion and maintaining their faith and spirituality, but there's many more questions about who they want to be and how they want to show up in the world as it pertains to religion and faith. And when Geoff Kullman reached out to me after meeting him at the conference and said, well, this might be interesting. I'm a pastor who went from being a pastor to an atheist. I said, game on, bro, let's go. So Geoff, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
Thanks for having me. And it should be noted that at that conference, we were also sharing I think a scotch or a whiskey or an old fashioned.
Yeah, there was something there. There was some kind of alcoholic libations going on for sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was a good conference and we had a lot of fun, and it was a fun evening because we were drinking and eating and everybody was sharing their stories. So but this story did not come up in our conversation. So I'm really looking forward to it. And so let's just kind of dive in, man. I'm going to start by saying I have had this crisis of faith. Actually, in my book, I talk about, sitting on a beach in the middle of the night, screaming at God, saying, okay, if I'm not supposed to be gay, then, just take me out with the ocean waters. And next morning I woke up basically covered in sand and looking up at the sky and going, well, I guess I'm here, so I guess I'm queer. And we moved on. So that's kind of how I knew I was good. But obviously something came up for you where you're like, no, this isn't a fit. So why don't you start to take us a little bit into that story, Geoff?
I guess I won't go into background too much yet. I mean, we can go back there, but the somewhat short version or truncated version. So as a person who believed the Christian story, as a person who taught it to others and based my life and vocation around it, raised my kids based on this story, part of the reason that or at least that I believed in this story was that it gave you hope, that it gave you relief, that it helped to ease your pain when you're going through difficult times, gave you something to, reach out to when life got tough. And so I watched a few really close friends go through some very difficult times. They're incredibly gracious, good people. Who've adopted kids, who have, kids that were living in orphanages that were treating children like they weren't even human. These were not people that deserved to be going through the crap that they were going through.
Right.
And so they were seeing their literally family members die too young, suffer for a long time, and die too young in their 20s. A grandma passing away in her 50s. And just that was the start of the whole thing of the unraveling of, I thought this story was supposed to give us relief. I thought this story was supposed to give us hope. And instead, these good people who are Christian people are experiencing nothing but hell on earth, and having to explain this hell to their kids. And for me, that began this moment of, well, crap, I guess this thing isn't real. If it's not providing the hope and the relief. that I'm telling others that it should and it does, then what's the point of the whole thing?
Right.
And so I remember sitting at this was my best man. I remember sitting at his 20-something-year-old brother's funeral, and hearing the pastor talk, and me sitting in the pew thinking, I guess this is what it's like on the other side, where all this is BS to me. All of a sudden, that was the moment where I realized I can't do this. I can't believe this anymore. And I was a pastor as well, so coming to the realization of I don't like any of what's coming out of this guy's mouth, and yet I have to go teach it to other people. Yeah, that was a very interesting time.
I'm sure.
Very interesting season in life for sure.
Well, it is, and I know, as I shared, my own little crisis of faith, and it actually started for me in college. And I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, and I went to Seventh-day Adventist schools my entire life, clear up through my second year of college. And it was in that second year of college that I'm like, this is BS, because I'm getting a grade to go to a religion class. I'm getting marked off if I'm not in church or in the Wednesday Vespers service, or if I'm not going to the week of prayer, I'm getting marked off and potentially getting written up for these things. I'm like, this is punishment, just for pure punishment's sake. I'm not, and the more I had to, get a grade for a religion class, and I'm not talking about like world religions. That to me is a different thing. You're learning about the different religions and how people see things and all this stuff. But when it's about religion and your faith, and you don't get the grade because you didn't recite this verse correctly, or you didn't, regurgitate what you've been told is supposed to be the belief behind this, I started questioning everything. And I still believe in a higher power, and that pisses people off when I say that. I'm like, well, I still believe there's something greater than me, but I'm not going to have this debate with you whether it's a God or something else. I just feel that way. And the more people kind of backlashed at me, the more I'm like, okay, this isn't playing good with me. And then obviously, as I came out of the closet, the hypocrisy started to bug the crap out of me. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And I don't go to church. I haven't in a long time, and I don't feel guilty about it. I live my life. I give gratitude for what I have, but it is one of those moments when you cross over. And it sounds like as you crossed over, you came to that realization that, okay, this fits better for me. And I'm curious, as that began to fit better for you, what was some of the stuff you started encountering? And obviously probably friends, family, there had to be some backlash that started to happen, man.
Yeah. Well, even just for me personally, right? I'm an analytical person. I'm a somewhat critical person, I guess you'd say. So like my faith experience always included a lot of doubt, but I always saw that doubt as a healthy questioning and growing, and that when people would just have this faith where they never questioned a thing, and they were always happy, and they were always, woo-woo about their faith, it just struck a chord as totally fake, totally inauthentic.
Yep.
To me, maybe that was their true expression. I don't know. But for me, it was, no. We learn and we grow by asking questions and delving into things that don't make sense. But I mean, those were ultimately the same questions and doubts that led to the whole unraveling. So coming out of my own story there of how do I accept that these doubts are now actually just untrue, that they weren't ever true. That was one thing personally, coming to that realization. Having conversations with my wife along that journey too was difficult, to say the least.
Yep.
It wasn't even so. I quit church. I quit being a pastor. I quit this Christian faith 2 years ago. I didn't until, and my wife knew the reasons why. She was along for that ride with me, but it wasn't until maybe 6 weeks ago that I used the A word, the atheist word, with her. And it even then took her back. She didn't know how to deal with that quite yet. Took her a couple of days to process that.
And I take it she's still practicing herself?
Yeah, she.
Okay.
And it's not quite a yes and no, but I mean the church where I was pastoring, the church where She went up until we just moved out of town very recently. But the church where she was going, it was a super liberal church, LGBTQ friendly, accepting church. It was it was a safe church for people to come and question and be who they are, and all that. So it was a great church to be at, because for me, the whole point was, we're here to question, we're here to learn, we're here to take things apart and maybe put them back together. And so she stayed there up until just a couple of weeks ago. And that's still an integral part of who she is. Although now she's trying to figure out what she does without the institution. She's kind of excited about, like you, kind of excited about this spirituality without the institution. What does that look like? And so she's eager to explore that for herself.
Why do you think it is so many people, though? And I think this is fundamental in many faiths and religions. They allow themselves to be in that space, as you just said. We're here to question and we're here to learn, but they almost become, in my opinion, become numb to the questioning. Like, well, this is just part of the practice. We question, and that's part of it. And then, of course, we endure pain because that's part of it, and we endure suffering. And I'm not going to say that life is not full of, I'm not going to say life isn't supposed to be, without pain or suffering. It's just part of life. That's the way I've always looked at it. But why do you think it is that so many religions operate from those premises of questioning and pain and suffering is just part of it? And then people become numb to it and they just go, okay, this is how we do it.
I mean, I think it harkens back to when, at least from Christianity, which is the only, I know a bit about other religions and their institutions and history, but Christianity is the only one that I can speak to with any degree of expertise or authority or knowledge. I mean, it's back to when life was black and white. The institution itself carried all the power, and this isn't quite what you asked, but I mean, you question at your own risk, right?
Right.
And it gives you that, like I said before, that sense of relief, that sense of hope from back in the day when life was really blinking hard, and life wasn't a certainty. A long life certainly wasn't a certainty, and so having that hope and that thing to look forward to in terms of the afterlife. I mean, it was all that you had to hold on to for some degree of pleasure in life or afterlife. So beginning to question that, beginning to doubt that, I mean, that was dangerous back in the day, but now we almost get like this rush out of it of, we're allowed to question things or doubt the existence of hell. And that still, leads us to a good conversation and all that. I mean, now it's almost like you're a rebel if you start to question, and it releases these endorphins for you. And that's healthy for some people. It was for me for a while until it wasn't all of a sudden.
Right. I find it really interesting it's one of the areas I don't tend to go play in much, because it's kind of like politics. I'm like, I'm not going to waste my energy. Here's what I believe. If you don't like that, that's okay. I don't really care. If that's what you believe and I don't like it, that's okay. There's too much other good stuff I can go do in my life. And a lot of people go, oh, well, you're just a wimp and you don't want. No, I don't choose to live my life in those debates. But as I've grown through it myself, there will be days, even when I say, like I said to you, I've seen myself much more spiritual than faith practicing. I will question, okay, but what does that really mean, Rick? What does that mean to be spiritual? Yeah. And for me, I've come to the conclusion that as a spiritual person, I tend to accept what is. And to put too much stake in what I don't know is actually something that can drive me crazy. It's like if I can't figure out if there's an afterlife and I focus on that, then it drives me nuts. But if I just accept we are here and this is what's happening right now, and then tomorrow will be what's happening right then, and the day after that will be happening right then. I'm not saying I don't plan for the future, but I think too often we as humans, and part of it because of how the faith-based stuff has come into so much of our lives in society, is it drives us to fearful thinking of the future instead of the future's coming. It's just coming. That's it. And I know people have a hard time wrapping their heads around those kind of thoughts. And then especially when you take and go, I don't believe there's a God or the existence of a higher power. Oh, they just want to, it's almost like you see their face and their, the cartoon of the ears and everything exploding out, because this is what we've been told in general for thousands of years to believe in. So when you come across someone that like kind of gives you that deer in the headlights look of, what do you mean you're an atheist? How do you handle that, Geoff?
Yeah. And a lot of times the question is, at least when it comes to me, is, oh, you don't mean you're an atheist. You're just agnostic. You believe in something. Well, I don't really care to put the energy behind believing in anything. Mm-hmm. I've seen behind that curtain. I know the arguments. I used to be the one on the other side of that argument for the entirety of my life, from childhood all the way up until a few years ago. But yeah, I mean, so often it's just that word, like it was to my wife, that word is a bit shocking. Mm-hmm. It's so polar opposite to what people expect, especially from someone like me. And I think their brain just literally doesn't know how to, I mean, biologically this makes sense. Their brain it finds it difficult to comprehend an idea that is so polar opposite to what they believe, what they've been taught, what their experience is.
All right.
They can accept the idea of, okay, so you don't believe in this God, but you believe in the higher power or something.
Right.
That is easier to accept than, well, no, I mean, I don't believe in anything. That doesn't mean I don't see the universe as an absolutely fascinating, beautiful place.
Right.
And that humanity still isn't entirely valuable and of immense worth. It's just where I start that story is just at a different place.
And that's interesting. As you were talking through that, it took me through what I have experienced as a member of the LGBT community, because people can't fathom, well, how are you attracted to someone of the opposite sex? It's a learned behavior. It's this or it's that. And when I say, no, I'm not, I just know this is who I am. And of course I get the same thing that you do. It's just a different story because I was married for 13 years. I had 2 children. And so that really fucks with them too. It's like, well, wait, we don't understand. I'm like, well, there's not really anything to understand. It was always who I was. I just was not allowing myself to be that because of societal pressures and religious beliefs and all this sort of stuff that I thought, okay, it's kind of like, and I hate to say this because then other people get pissed off, but I really don't care. It's kind of like an alcoholic. Oh no, I'm not an alcoholic, but they're drinking behind the curtain, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, no, I'm not gay, but I'm doing it behind the curtain. And it is very similar because people they can't equate to that. But when I turn the conversation around and, especially those that say, well, you chose to be gay. I'm like, And when did you choose to be heterosexual?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they don't know what to do. And that's usually when I see the ears explode. It's they can't comprehend that answer because we as humans, we have to have the answer that seems like, okay, that resolves it. And when you say, well, when did you choose to be heterosexual? They can't really resolve that because they know the answer is I didn't. And I didn't choose to be gay either. There wasn't a magic moment in my childhood where I'm like, let's see, oh, girl or no, I think I like boys. It was just, I saw that I like boys. Does it come any differently for a heterosexual person? I don't think so. It's like suddenly you just know, and it's really interesting. So what's been one of the biggest challenges for you other than obviously, intimate family life stuff, but as you've kind of begun to open up to this with people in the world?
Yeah. For me, I mean, besides family relationships and things and when as a family, an extended family, faith was a massive part of the identity of who we were. I mean, that's been led to some difficult conversations, but honestly, the most difficult part has been personally so much of my, not just identity, but my values, my worldview was wrapped up in this theological, faith-based idea of who I was and what I believed and how I saw the world. So we went to a church. I pastored at a church where faith and social justice were intertwined, right? Where how we fought homelessness in our community, or how we viewed racism, or even LGBTQ acceptance in our as full members of the community. All this justice conversation and worldview was all wrapped up in my faith. And so when that faith was gone, it started this there was like an absence, like a void there of, I don't know what any of this is, because it's all been so tied up. And I don't think, if you just went to a fundamentalist conservative evangelical church, I don't think it would have been the same as my experience, where it was all so tied up. Because faith was about justice, faith was about values, and about how we treat other people in a different way than most churches would have. So for a long time, my wife, she'd try to talk about the homeless initiatives in our community, or she'd be reading a book about white institutional racism, and it would all just be triggers for me, where like my shoulders would literally start to shake, or my head would twitch, like not talking about faith stuff at all, but stuff that had been so wrapped up in my faith that I didn't know what to do with it. And it all was a trigger wrapped up into that faith conversation. So that was the most difficult part of the whole thing, of what the hell do I believe about any of this now? Because it's all so wrapped up in this faith bundle.
Oh yeah. And anybody who says that it isn't, I kind of have to look at them like, are you serious? Really? Your faith doesn't intertwine all this other stuff? Yeah. I don't buy that one bit. In fact, it's interesting to talk to family members with it. I don't really talk to them, but to hear conversations through the filter of my parents about family members, uncles and aunts, who practice the Seventh-day Adventist faith, and then they happen to be big Trump supporters, which just blows my mind, because if I look at the way the Seventh-day Adventist faith believes, that they even know, they really hold on to the verses in the Bible that in the end of time, there will be the leaders who come, in wolves' clothing and and you will be blinded to believe in them and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, okay, why are you guys have learned this from? I learned this from when I was a kid. I still know it. I don't believe it, but I see it in my own way. And then when they get asked why they support him, it's like, well, because of his stance on abortion. I'm really,
oh gosh,
that one thing is what you're going to hang your fucking hat on with this one.
Yeah.
And that's again where this hypocrisy thing just it shows up. It's like, I see the following of something like that, and I go, I can't comprehend. I just don't. And I feel blessed because I have dabbled in Buddhism enough to like take myself to a different space of, I can't say complete non-judgment, but like, what does this matter? There's no meaning unless I assign the meaning to it, And so when I start hearing that stuff, that's where I get into my practice around Buddhism. Like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to step up this way. And we're going to go into that space. But it's so fascinating to watch this unravel, which is very similar to probably what happened for you. You hear those things, you get triggered, and then it's like ready to explode.
Yeah. And I've never my wife is the only one that I've ever talked about this with. So let me tell the world now, put it out there on the internet. Around the same time as everything was starting to unravel, white evangelical Americans, 81% of them elected Trump. And that was the moment where I said, oh, fuck it. This can't be real. Right. If that group that's supposed to believe what I believe and have been taught to believe elected this man, I don't want to get too mean, like that, then the whole thing can't be what I think it is. This whole death of, this story was supposed to give us hope and relief, combined with, and yet they elect that.
Yep. I agree.
That was probably the final straw, which to some people sounds ridiculous, but if your institution is supposed to reflect the values that you say, and you elect this man, and still to this day in 2019, believe in this man, it's still the white evangelical folks that are holding them up. Those things don't make any sense together.
No, they don't.
So
they don't
that was the final straw where this thing can't mean what I think it means. Screw it. I'm done.
Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting for me. I had very similar, well, I was well beyond it before the whole Trump thing, but when I came out of the closet finally at the age 36, and then I went through my own versions of hell with family and arguing about, well, you're picking out this one thing in the Bible, which actually you don't even know if that's actually what it means, but yet you're wearing jewelry, you're eating pork, you're wearing wovens, you have divorces. That just was that final straw for me where I'm like, okay, I can't do this. And it was almost it was the burning of the bridge that night on the beach for sure, because I was like literally like, please, if that's who you are as a God, I can't do this. I literally can't do this, you know? And I know some people listening to this may be going, okay, I'm done listening to Rick. That's fine. I'm just saying my truth, because I think coming out of the closet around your religious beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, how you show up in the world in this, whatever you want to call it, spiritual form or whatever it is another piece of letting people see you and see you for who you really are. And if they can't be there with you, then that's okay. But then at least they're not there wasting their energy, and you're not there wasting your energy. You're just there. And it's interesting, Geoff, because when we met, I had just had 2 similar conversations with 2 other people that week who are in the same exact space as you, without knowing that you were going through this. But this conversation is very reminiscent of conversations I had with some people that I'm like, wow, I would have never saw this coming, who have really come to that similar space that you have of, I don't believe. I just don't believe, because it's not in alignment with who I am. And yet, as they said it, it reminded me of when I see a client get to the space in their coming out journey where they just say, this is who I am, period. There's no shame. There's no apology. There's no guilt, whatever there might be wrapped up in all of that. And when I can hear it in their voice and I see it in their face, or most of the time I hear it in their voice because I work with them via phone or a Zoom call like we're doing right now, I know that's when they've arrived at the space where they can actually start to step forward and they just be who they are. And it's a very powerful space. Yet it's a very scary space for other people, because now that person represents something to them that they can't comprehend. And that's all any of this is. Anytime somebody comes out of a closet, and I've said this before, the closet that somebody's coming out of is for their benefit. The closet that somebody sees them coming out of will scare the person who's watching, because they can't comprehend how anybody could come out of that closet.
Yeah. It doesn't fit into their narrative.
No, it's not their narrative at all. Yeah. And that's why there's so much pushback. You need to do this to make me feel good with you. No, I don't. And we all do that, but really nobody has to do anything to make anybody else feel good with them. You either are good with them or you're not.
And how you feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So I'm curious, and I know this is fairly new for you, but as a father, how does this play out for you? Because I know how it played out for me. In fact, the funniest thing that happened just recently. So I never really took my kids to church. There was a little bit of time right before I came out of the closet that my wife and I explored a couple of churches. And ironically, one of the churches we went to was a mega church in Southern California, which ended up being run by a very homophobic pastor whose son ended up committing suicide. I'm like, why the hell was I going there? And I know part of it was I was kind of being my rebellious, not going to be a Seventh-day Adventist, so let's go to something completely, opposite of that. So there was a little bit of time that the girls would go to, Sunday school, which was, of course, blasphemous in my family. Like, you don't go on Sunday, you go on Saturday.
Right. Yeah.
But then once I came out, there really wasn't anything. And the reason I did it was because I'm like, I want my kids to be able to choose. So roll forward literally to 2 weeks ago, my oldest one and her boyfriend went to see Jesus Christ Superstar. I said, I hope you enjoyed it. It's a really good musical.
Yeah.
And she comes out of it and she texts me, she goes, it was really good. I'm like, yeah, isn't it great? And she goes, but I wish you would have told me more about Jesus so I would have understood more of it. I started laughing. I'm like, well, I gave you the choice. I don't want to be that parent that says, you're going to go do this, you're going to understand, because that was the dogmatic stuff that I went through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't feel like it was my place to go do that. But back to the question, how are you navigating this? Obviously with a wife who's still searching herself for how to do this, but now here you are. How do you think you're going to do this with your kids?
Yeah. So initially it was, I felt, I've put enough on my wife having to explore what our relationship is now. Not that our relationship changed, but that's a pretty significant portion of who I was and how we connected. Yep. All of a sudden changed. That was a shift. And so as she kept going to church, the kids could go to church with her. I was never too worried because it was a pretty left-leaning, liberal, safe environment. If we'd been going to some uber conservative evangelical church, that might have been I might have been a bit more vocal. Concerned, but yeah, it's a conversation that we haven't fully, had yet. Right. We're seeing where it evolves to. And now that we've moved to a different city, we don't have a church that we go to. Yep. She wants to explore this non-institutional version of faith, which means we can put that conversation about our kids on the back burner. But as things like Christmas come up, what do we do with that story? I love Christmas. Right. I've always loved Christmas too. Probably I should be institutionalized the amount that I love Christmas. But now it's not about Jesus, or we can acknowledge that this is the tradition, but it's not. At least what Dad wants to talk about at Christmas. Let's focus on Santa. But we'll get there eventually. Kids are free to ask us questions, both of us, and get different responses, and I think that'll be healthy. Yep. For them. It could be confusing for them too, but just as long as we both we're open about it, right?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, and of course, being a gay parent, there was a lot of conversations that then had to be explored throughout the years.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to relating to your child in the way that they can best understand in that moment in time that the question comes up. And I learned that really quickly with my girls. And each time something would come up, we would address it. And we would, depending on whether it was with mom or with me, it would get addressed. And then at the time we had a pretty good relationship. So I would share, hey, this is how I handled it. Just want you to know, this is what I said, and so on and so forth. And it really worked. Now, granted, you're not in that space where, you got separated parents and all that sort of stuff. But I think it is that interesting space to play in where here's how I would like to respond to this. How does that work for you? Because I don't even think this. I know my girls have a much broader interpretation of life because of so many of the things that they went through being in a household with two dads and then a mom who was single for a long time and then just recently remarried in the last couple of years. Their perspective is much broader and they see things from a completely different, lens than a lot of their friends about marriage, relationships, sexuality, all that stuff that has influenced many other areas of their life as well. And I think people get hung up in this stuff like, oh, but what about the kids? And I always want to say, and not to be trite about a movie tile, but the kids will be all right. The kids are just fine, provided you give them the room for the kids to be just fine with this stuff. And it is a challenge because you got two parental influences going on,
And each kid is so different, right? I mean, our oldest is super into, even though he's 8, he's super into science. He loves facts and logic. He listens to nothing but science podcasts. And so we're going to have a different type of conversation with him, not just because of his age, but because of who he is, than we would with our 5-year-old, who is just a bundle of energy and couldn't sit still for 2 minutes to talk about it.
5-year-old, you can say, hey, guess what? 5-year-old gets to go, you don't have to sit in church and not be told not to wiggle around and everything, you know?
No, but he loved the social aspect of it, right? So he misses that part.
Right.
Whereas nobody would sit down and talk science with our oldest.
Right.
Because most of the boys there were energetic kids who just wanted to run around. So
interesting.
Each kid is different, and each stage as they grow up is different. But yeah, I think that's just an unfolding conversation that my wife and I will continue to have.
Yeah. So real quick here before we wrap up, I'm curious, what's one thing you've noticed different for yourself since you've come into this space of owning this is my belief and this is how I see the world?
The freedom, the weight off my shoulders, the ability, permission to just be who I am, has been huge. I didn't expect, literally I walked around feeling lighter in the weeks and months after quitting my job or resigning from my position. Yeah, just the ability to breathe more comfortably, to live into who I was. And all this it was a lot easier because I have a incredibly supportive spouse. But yeah, I can't even put it into words, the difference and just the weight off the shoulders. Being who you are, living into your own narrative, your own story. The freedom is it's unbelievable.
That's so powerful. That's such a beautiful place to wind it up, because Geoff, what you just said is identical, so identical to so many LGBTQ people when they come out of the closet. The freedom, the weight off my shoulders, the permission to just be who I am, and just the lightness. I mean, when I work with people, I can tell. I mean, not only does their tone of voice and everything you start to see it. It's like, okay. And they sit up a little taller and they're a lot looser and they're more relaxed and they're more fun. And I was a sullen son of a bitch. And it's not that when I came out, I'm suddenly, holla, let's go. You know, that wasn't me. But I was definitely happy. People used to say, you never smile. You never smile.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you want to know why I never smiled? Because I didn't have anything to fucking smile about. When you're living a dual life and you're hiding yourself, you don't have a reason to smile. And I'm so glad you brought that full circle as we wrap up here, because that freedom, weight off your shoulders, permission to be who you are, and the ability to breathe is what this podcast is all about. That when you uncloset yourself, the breath you get to take, no matter what that closet is probably one of the most precious breaths you ever take in your life, because you know you're starting to live your truth. So
yeah.
I'm really glad we met, man. This was a perfect conversation for this podcast. So and keep being you, man. Just you can't keep from
absolutely. It's a lot more fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thanks for being here, Geoff. I so appreciate you, bro.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Hey, Life Uncloseted family. Another episode of Life Uncloseted has come to an end, and it is time for all of us to sashay away and go face our fears, make those bold moves, and stand up to living our life without apology. But before you do, I've got a favor to ask of you. Would you hop over to iTunes or Spotify or Podbean or wherever it is that you're listening to this, and just give us a little bit of love if you like what we're doing here at Life Uncloseted. Here's what it does. It helps other people find the show. It helps other people get to know what we're all about. And you just might help change a life. In fact, if you really want to change a life, we'd love it if you just ask a friend to take a listen and see what they think. So that's it. Love you all deeply. I'm Rick Clemens, the host of Life Uncloseted, and never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living your life uncloseted.